Well now, good evening, friends. Andy Taylor here. What if I told you that when my son Opie found a bag containing $10,000 on the side of the road, enough money to change our lives, the hardest lesson I ever had to teach him wasn't about honesty, but about why doing the right thing often feels wrong at first, and how the real treasure we found that day had nothing to do with money at all. This is a story about integrity, about teaching our children that character matters more than comfort, and about how the values we choose to live by define who we really are. It started on a Saturday afternoon in June of 1959, when Opie came running into the house breathless and excited, clutching a large canvas bag. "Pa," he shouted. "Pa, you won't believe what I found." I was walking back from fishing at Myers Lake, and I saw this bag on the side of the road near Miller's Bend. I thought it was just trash, but when I picked it up, it was heavy. "Pa, there's money in it. Lots of money." He dumped the contents of the bag onto our kitchen table, and Aunt Bee and I stared in shock. Stack after stack of $20 and $50 bills tumbled out, neatly bundled with paper bands. I counted it carefully while Opie watched with wide eyes. $10,000. In 1959, that was a fortune. That was more than I made in 3 years as sheriff. That was enough to buy a house, a car, put a child through college, change a family's entire future. Opie was dancing around the kitchen with excitement. "Pa, we're rich. We can fix the roof like Aunt Bee's been wanting. We can get a new car. I can get that bicycle I've been saving for. Pa, this is the best day ever." Aunt Bee was more practical, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind. "Andy," she said carefully, "this is a lot of money. We could certainly use it. The house does need repairs. And Opie could use new shoes." But her voice trailed off because she knew, as I knew, that wanting something and deserving it are two very different things. I looked at my son's excited face and knew this was going to be one of the most important teaching moments of his young life. "Opie," I said gently, "this money doesn't belong to us. It belongs to someone who lost it, and that person is probably heartbroken right now. We need to find out who it belongs to and give it back." The joy drained from Opie's face immediately. "But Pa," he protested, "I found it fair and square. Finders keepers, right? That's what Tommy Johnson always says. If someone was careless enough to lose it, isn't it kind of their fault?" Those were the words of a 10-year-old trying to justify keeping something he desperately wanted, and I understood the temptation. But understanding it didn't make it right. "Son," I said, "let me ask you something. If you lost your fishing rod, the one you saved 3 months of allowance to buy, and someone found it, would you want them to keep it or try to find you?" He thought about that. "I'd want them to find me," he admitted. "Because it's mine." "Exactly," I said. "This money is someone's. Maybe it's all they have in the world. Maybe they're scared and desperate right now. How would we feel keeping something that belongs to someone else, knowing they're suffering?" Word spread through Mayberry quickly, as it always did. By evening, half the town knew about the money Opie had found, and everyone had an opinion. Arnie came by, all official and by the book. "Andy," he said, "this needs to go into police custody immediately. We'll hold it for 90 days as required by law, and if nobody claims it, it legally becomes Opie's. That's the proper procedure." Technically, Barney was right. But I also knew that just because something is legal doesn't automatically make it right. Floyd stopped by the next day with a different perspective. "Andy," he said, fortune smiled on that boy. $10,000. That's a blessing. If the owner hasn't come forward by now, they probably don't even know they lost it. Could be from some big corporation or a bank. They won't miss it. You should let Opie keep it." Even Clara Edwards weighed in. She came by with a pie and her opinion. "Sheriff Taylor," she said, "I understand wanting to do the right thing, but think practically. That money could send Opie to college. It could secure his future. Sometimes God provides in mysterious ways. Maybe this is his provision for your family." All these voices, well-meaning people, making arguments that had some logic to them. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't tempted. $10,000. I thought about the leak in our roof that I'd been patching for 2 years. I thought about Aunt Bee's worn-out stove that barely worked. I thought about Opie's future and how that money could help. The temptation was real and powerful. But then I thought about the person who'd lost it, and I couldn't shake the image of someone desperate and heartbroken, and I knew what we had to do. I took out an advertisement in the Mayberry Gazette and posted notices around town. Found, large sum of money near Miller's Bend. Owner must provide exact amount and description of container to claim. Contact Sheriff Taylor. Then we waited. Days passed. Opie checked with me every morning. "Anyone claim it yet, Pa?" When I said no, I could see the hope growing in his eyes, the possibility that maybe we'd get to keep it after all. And I could see the temptation growing too, the way he'd started spending the money in his mind, making plans, dreaming dreams. One evening, about a week after he'd found the money, Opie came to me looking troubled. "Pa," he said, "I've been thinking about the money a lot. And I was wondering, what if nobody ever claims it? What if the owner doesn't see the notice or is too scared to come forward? Does that mean it's okay to keep it then?" I could hear the hope in his voice, the desire for permission to stop feeling guilty about wanting it. "Son," I said, "let me tell you something about honesty and integrity. These things aren't about what you can get away with. They're about who you are when nobody's watching. Right now, you and I both know that money belongs to someone else. Even if that person never comes forward, even if legally we could keep it, we'd know. And that knowing would change something inside us." Opie looked confused. "But Pa," he said, "how would it change us if we used it for good things? If we fixed the house and saved for my education and helped Aunt Bee?" I chose my words carefully, because I said, once you make the choice that something is okay, just because you can get away with it, it becomes easier to make that choice again. Today, it might be keeping found money. But what about tomorrow? What if you find out you got too much change at the store? What if you see someone drop $1 and they don't notice? What if you're given credit for something you didn't do? Each time, if you choose convenience over honesty, it gets easier. Pretty soon, you're not the person you thought you were. You're someone who does whatever benefits them, regardless of what's right. And son, I don't want that for you. I want you to be someone who does the right thing even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because that's what character really is. On the 10th day after we posted the notice, an old farmer named Mr. Peterson came hesitantly into my office. He was a man in his early 70s, wearing worn overalls and a worried expression. "Sheriff Taylor," he said quietly, "I saw your notice about found money. I think it might be mine. I lost a bag containing money near Miller's Bend. about 10 days ago. My heart sank and soared at the same time. Can you tell me how much was in the bag and what it looked like? I asked. He described the canvas bag perfectly and said it contained $10,000 in 20s and 50s. That's my life savings, he said, tears forming in his eyes. I was taking it to the bank in North Pilot to put it in a safe deposit box. My wife passed last year, and I'd been keeping the money hidden at home, but I got worried about thieves. So I put it in that old bag and was driving to the bank. My truck has a bad door, doesn't latch right. I think the bag must have fallen out when I went around that curve. When I got to the bank and realized it was gone, I was devastated. That's everything I have in the world. 40 years of saving, penny by penny. Why didn't you come forward sooner? I asked gently. He looked down, ashamed. Because I was scared, nobody would believe me. An old farmer with no proof, claiming he lost $10,000? I figured whoever found it would keep it, and I'd just look like a fool trying to get money that wasn't mine. But I've been so desperate these past 10 days. I haven't slept, barely eaten. That money was going to see me through my last years. Without it, I don't know what I'll do. I saw in his face the desperation and honesty that told me this was indeed the owner. Mr. Peterson, I said, that money is safe. My son found it, and we've been holding it waiting for you. I called for Opie to come to the office. When he arrived and saw Mr. Peterson's weathered face and tearful eyes, something changed in my son's expression. This is Mr. Peterson, I said to Opie. This is the man whose money you found. Opie looked at the old farmer, really looked at him, and saw perhaps for the first time that this wasn't some abstract concept about money and honesty. This was a real person who'd been suffering. Mr. Peterson looked at Opie. You found my money, son? Opie nodded. I found it by the road. I wanted to keep it at first, but my pay said it belonged to someone, and we needed to find them. Mr. Peterson's eyes filled with tears again. You have no idea what this means to me, young man. That money represents 40 years of my life. Every dollar saved from selling crops, from doing odd jobs, from going without things I wanted. It's all I have. Without it, I'd have nothing. I'd probably lose my farm. You could have kept it, and I'd never have known. But you didn't. It tells me you're a good boy being raised by a good father. Opie was quiet for a moment, and I could see him processing everything. Then he said softly, Mr. Peterson, I'm glad we found you. I'm glad you got your money back. For the first time since finding the bag, I saw genuine peace in my son's face. Mr. Peterson insisted on giving Opie a reward. He pulled out $200. Please, he said, let me give you this. It's only right. But Opie, to my immense pride, shook his head. No, sir, he said. That's your money. All of it. You worked hard for it. I just found it. The right thing isn't something you get paid for. It's just what you're supposed to do. Mr. Peterson looked at me with wonder. Andy Taylor, you've raised a remarkable son. I thanked him and watched as the old farmer left with his life savings restored, walking taller than when he'd entered. His burden lifted that evening. Opie and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. He'd been quiet since Mr. Peterson left, thinking. Pa, he finally said, I have a confession. When I first found that money, all I could think about was what we could buy. I thought about it so much that I started feeling like it was ours, like we deserved it just because I found it. And when you said we had to find the owner, I was mad. I thought you were being mean. I paused my whittling and looked at my son. But now? I asked. Now, he said slowly, I'm glad we gave it back. When I saw Mr. Peterson's face, when I heard about how hard he worked for that money, I realized that keeping it would have been stealing. Even though I found it, even though nobody would have known, it would have been wrong. And Pa, here's the thing. When we gave him the money back, I felt better than I ever would have felt spending it. Is that weird? I smiled. That's not weird at all, son. That's your conscience talking. That's integrity. See, there are two kinds of treasure in this world. There's the kind you can hold in your hand, like money or possessions. And then there's the kind you carry in your heart, like knowing you did the right thing, like self-respect and clear conscience. The first kind of treasure can be lost or stolen. The second kind, nobody can ever take from you. Today, you learned that the second kind is worth more. Opie thought about that. I do feel kind of rich, he admitted. Richer than if we'd kept the money. That's exactly right, I said. You made a choice today that will affect who you become. You chose character over cash. You chose doing right over doing easy. And I'm prouder of you right now than I've ever been. The story spread through Mayberry, as stories do in small towns. But this time, the gossip was different. People talked about the boy who gave back $10,000, about integrity in action, about values being taught and learned. Some folks who'd initially argued we should keep the money came by to say they'd been wrong. Floyd stopped by to apologize. Andy, he said, I should have known better than to suggest you keep that money. You taught me something today, too. Values aren't just things we talk about in church or teach in school. They're things we live, especially when it costs us something. Clara Edwards brought by another pie and an apology as well. I was thinking practically, she said, but I wasn't thinking rightly. That boy of yours showed more character than most adults. I know that the case taught me something about moral education that I've never forgotten. Teaching children about honesty and integrity isn't just about telling them what's right. It's about showing them in real situations where the stakes are high and the temptation is real. Opie didn't learn about honesty from a lecture. He learned it by facing genuine temptation, by struggling with desire versus duty, and by ultimately choosing character. He learned it by seeing a real person whose life was affected by his choice. That's how values become real. Not through abstract discussions, but through lived experiences where doing right costs something, but rewards something greater, not looking back on the whole situation. I realized that finding that money was actually a gift, just not in the way Opie initially thought. It wasn't a gift of wealth. It was a gift of opportunity, the opportunity to face a real moral dilemma and make the right choice. It was the opportunity for a father to teach and a son to learn one of life's most important lessons. The money itself came and went. But what Opie learned that summer about integrity, about the difference between legal and right, about the wealth that comes from a clear conscience, those lessons will be with him forever. They'll guide his choices long after I'm gone. And that's worth far more than $10,000. Well now, that's the story of the found money and the lesson about honesty that was worth more than any amount of cash. It's a reminder that we're faced with choices every day about who we want to be. Sometimes the right choice costs us something. Sometimes doing the honest thing means giving up something we really want. But every time we choose character over convenience, integrity over advantage, we're building something inside ourselves that no amount of money can buy. We're becoming people who can look ourselves in the mirror with pride, people whose word means something, people who sleep well at night because our conscience is clear. If you ever find yourself facing a choice between what's easy and what's right, remember young Opie and the $10,000. Remember that the truest treasure isn't what you can hold in your hand, but what you carry in your heart. Remember that your character is built one choice at a time, and every honest choice, no matter how much it costs, makes you richer in the ways that really matter. And if you're raising children, remember that the best lessons aren't taught with words, but with actions. With real choices in real situations where values are tested and proven. Come back and visit again real soon, friends. Until then, this is Andy Taylor saying good night from Mayberry. Remember, doing the right thing doesn't always feel right at first, but it always feels right in the end. Take care now.